Welcome back to the review board. Today we are going to be looking at my latest film, Apex, and giving that a review. Apex was not what I expected going into it. This movie is a thriller, maybe what I would classify as more of an adventure thriller. So still sticking to more of the physical side rather than the psychological side of the thriller movies. And yeah, like I said, not what I expected going into it. A little bit different. I think this movie had some memes related to it when it first came out, and so that kind of brought it to people's attentions a bit more. Um, Certainly very interesting. But yeah, not necessarily what it says on the tin. So let's have a look at it. Starting with the casting, Taron Egerton, Charlie Theron. Yeah, I think they were both pretty significant. I mean, there's not really many other roles in the movie, and certainly no other significant roles in the movie. There's a little bit of setup, but really it revolves around those two and the relationship between the two of them. I think they did a really good job in the position that they were in of forgetting that it was them. And that really lended to the movie and kind of drawed you in a bit more. I don't think that's quite verging on that made for the part role, but it's getting close because you're forgetting who the person is and just kind of associating them with the role, and that's a very good sign. So definitely we are looking in the top here. I think 3 would be too low, and I feel like it's just falling short of there because could it have been done by somebody else? Possibly. Did they make the roles memorable? Certainly so. And so I think that makes it pretty clear cut in the 4 category. Let's have a look at the production. The production was nice. There isn't anything super memorable to me. There's a lot of really good set dressing moments that really help bring not the fear factor, but that like trepidation, that kind of like yuck, and that's really good for something that is not necessarily meant to scare you, but is meant to be evocative of some kind of disgust, I guess, some kind of distaste. I think a lot of it was set dressings with where they chose to set the films. I think that helped certainly. Um, mostly set in Australia. I think there's a few other places they could have done the same thing, but I think that helped with the character development a little bit and helped with the other things. So that means that the production is kind of, it's not doing anything wrong, but it's not doing anything right either. There's nothing that they're doing that is memorable to you and that is making the movie stand out. And I get it, that's not what the movie's about, When you've got such a small cast, it's hard to make that about the production without it being a very conscious choice from the beginning to make the movie about that. There's very few movies that I would say I've ever really watched that have such a small cast where the production is really significant and memorable and kind of like in your mind without them making that choice from the beginning. That's like something almost in the opening scene that you're going to kind of see and feel. Um, Maybe I'm just not thinking of anything in this moment in time, but certainly of the movies that kind of come to my mind, this is along that similar mind. And I think it's relatively a good choice because it meant that they weren't taking anything away from that interaction, which is what they wanted. But it does mean that there's no outstanding features. And so we are definitely looking 6 or 7 here. There's no 8 and there's no 5 because there's nothing that's giving it that oomph to go up there, and there's nothing wrong, right? None of the choices that they made were poor. I think probably we're going to put it into the 6th category just because of I feel like they could have done more. I think they could have either done it from the adventuring side. You know, this movie is got a lot of things that are really talking about that people that are living that kind of adventurous sport lifestyle, you know, mountain climbing, kayaking, hiking, all of these things. And they could have set dressed that a bit more to kind of just, you know, showcase that to people, to inspire people with that. And it does two things. Not only does it inspire and interest people and kind of get them going, but also it sets it for the characters too. So it's like a double-edged sword. And so I think they could have done more. So that will be a 6. Yeah, I really think they could have done a bit more with it. There's nothing wrong, and so I'm, you know, we're not going to negatively impact it here, but it's a missed opportunity, and it feels like a missed opportunity. You know, I'm not the most adventurous person myself, but it interests me, and certainly in a movie where you're thinking about these things and you're doing these things, take a moment to show it off when it's part of the movie, rather than just do like the bare minimum to keep it in the story, you know? So now we'll go to the story part and dig into more of that story side. Generally, the story was good and interesting. It keeps you engaged really well without overdoing any part, right? It's at its core, this movie is pure simplicity. You know, you've got a tragedy that has occurred during your adventures, and that has led to somebody going to get lost in the jungle to find themselves again. And while that has happened, you have run into the only thing you don't want to find out there, which is the worst and most undesirable of human beings. It's that simple. And so I think that simplicity they did such a good job of keeping to that and not distracting from that in any way, which was great. However, if we look at the other side, what was missing and what I was really interested in, okay, you've met this horrible person and these unfortunate things have happened, but they haven't really explained the motivation behind that person being the way they are. We can all appreciate the fact that this person is unhinged and completely psychopathic in nature. But I need an element of knowing why he's behaving that way. Especially if you're going to force such interactions between these two characters. I need to know why. And for a change, I think this is a script issue rather than an acting issue. Because what they showed on screen of that character was excellent. But they didn't give enough space for that character to show why. And maybe partly I think that was a choice. They didn't want to give you enough about this character to sympathize with them, to give them any kind of positive angle to them. They wanted to keep you kind of at arm's length from them. But I think that's wrong. I think that's wrong because, one, they did such a good job of portraying this craziness. You know, this person that nobody wants to meet this person in a dark alley in any situation, you know. And so you've got to give them the room to do more than that, to know why, to give the people to be like, I understand why he is the way he is, but he shouldn't have done that. You know, I can see what made you this way, but you should have made different choices in life. And I think we as the audience need that opportunity. So on the one hand, I think we have to reward it well for that simplicity that is excellently done. But because there's so little there, that bit that's missing, which is why is he the way he is, shows up more because it can't be hidden in anything because there's nothing to hide it. So even though the writing of who he is and how bad he is was excellent, we do need to know more from a script perspective. We need that written for him. So, where is that going to fit in? The overall storage arc lineage is weak. Well, it's not, because we're talking about the simplicity of that line and it's a strong line. So there is nothing wrong with that. So even this, we're higher than this. We're not. Well. This is where we get a little bit tricky. It's like the good marks are all there, but how do we mark them down for what's missing? You know, not suspecting all the things that were going on, it's all there. So if we look at the simplicity of how well executed it was on its own, without any of the flaws, we're looking at a 17 or 18. But now we have to look at the flaw and how much that detracts from that 17, 18 points. Because, like I said, they didn't have any other subplots going on. They didn't have any other things. They just had this one main arc that was well done. And so because it didn't have everything that it needed for that one main arc, you could possibly overlook things in other circumstances. You can't in this one because it's more obvious. So I think we're looking at a 16. Because if we say it would have made it up to an 18, 2 points down for what is not enough there, I think. Otherwise, you're marking it down too much, because it's not like you're left unsatisfied. It's just like you're left feeling that something is missing. If it's enough that you're left unsatisfying, it means at the end of the movie you're like, well, why did that happen? And that wasn't there. So we're going to leave that as a 16 for the minute. Now, into the meat and potatoes. It really came down to this relationship. The relationship of a person who is dealing with their trauma, dealing with their situation, and trying to do these unusual, dangerous things as a way of managing their day-to-day life, and how that emotion relates to somebody who's unhinged and no longer part of society, and the choices that they are making with everybody that's around them. That chemistry was really well done, and there's no way around it. And it was really well done from multiple perspectives, right? We've not really seen Taron Egerton doing a role from this side. Certainly not seen him playing a role of somebody this unhinged. Charlie Theron is known iconically as somebody who is this strong pinnacle of a person, and for her to bring that down a level to somebody who could be surprised, could be scared, but not overrun, was so interesting and nice, because it showed this other side. And it's like, if they had just played too much to their comforts of what they normally show on screen, it would not have been as interesting. And so that range speaks to them as actors, and really lifted the movie very well, and it made it a lot better than what it was. Now, the complexity of those characters had moments. It had moments, but because of the lacking of the script, I would say it wasn't enough, and that affected them, but it didn't detract from them, right? Because it didn't add anything negative to them, but it affected them. It leashed them, you know? It meant that they weren't able to really unfurl their wings to kind of that top category. The full emotional investment, excellent range, and unbridled embodiment. But we have got this high complexity of them feeling sad, of them in this difficult situation that they don't want to be in, while still dealing with other things that are going on. Of him being a crazy psychopath, but that's somehow connected to his mother, you know? They didn't fully answer all of these questions because the script isn't giving them that room, that overhead for them to do it. But they are showing you that in those parts. You know, he was ruthless and crazy in the different ways that he approached that, in the stickiness that he had to her, of you know, that moment where it almost cost him everything to attach himself to her. It's like, you know, that is unhinged, and there's only a certain type of person that would do that. And the being able to get across those emotions is really interesting. You know, her being this person who's trying to retreat from society and is not able to, because this person has literally attached himself to her with a steel wire, you know? That's crazy. So, we are not in this top category, but we are very close. I do think there was a couple of unbelievable moments in some of the choices that actually happened, but I do think that came back more towards the script than the acting. Because in all the moments where it came down to the acting, I felt it. But it's hard not to key the two together. We've already got this down in 16 because of those kind of missing parts. And again, I think, maybe those parts wouldn't have felt missing or wouldn't have felt. It's hard to say. It's hard to say whether it was slightly unbelievable because they wanted to keep the story moving and keep it running, which they did a good job of, or whether it was slightly unbelievable because they didn't show enough of information, either in the production or in the acting, as to why they would make those choices. This is a relatively short film. It's only an hour and a half. They certainly had room to show those things. Maybe they were worried that would have come off as boring to people, but I think it's better than the alternative. You've got to show all the parts that keep things moving, and that's... Otherwise, you end up with stuff missing. So, I think we're looking in the middle here. In the middle here, maybe just towards the top. So we're looking at around that 55 mark. Just as a kind of a counterbalance, all the parts that are there kind of well done, with a few parts kind of missing with ties to these other factions that are just kind of pulling it down a little bit. I don't know, I am still thinking about these two a little bit and whether they are slightly too high. Maybe this should be 54 and maybe this should be 15. Is it too much to affect both of them? Maybe I should only affect one. Yeah, I think maybe it's a bit too much for both. I think we're just going to hit the script a little bit because, again, I think they could have done a few more bits with the production to make the script a bit better, and they could have done a few more bits with the script to give them a bit more room in the acting. We can only work with what they were able to give us within the acting, and overall, I was not only very impressed, but so, I enjoyed seeing them in this different role. It really, it engaged me and captivated me and made it much more enjoyable for me. So I think we're not going to touch that too much. So let's start having a look at that as a whole. So we got 60, 70, 80. 80 points. That seems about right. Literally the bottom end of great. For a short film, for something that's a bit smaller, I think they had room to make it a bit better, but it's still a great film. I enjoyed it. I was surprised. As I say, it wasn't what I expected going in, but I was pleasantly captivated throughout the movie. There was no point in time where I was thinking, is this enough, or I'm getting bored here. It was very obvious to me that it was a shorter film, though. That did stick out in my mind. And whether that's because they either didn't want to put more investment into the script, or they just couldn't get anything in those extra scenes that they were happy with enough for them to keep them in the movie, we'll never know. But I wish they had. I wish they had given that script a little bit more headroom, given the movie a little bit more volume, and, maybe we could have been talking about a high-end great film. but you know, not everything can be exceptional and amazing. So, Apex, 80 points. There we are. Thank you guys for staying for my review. Let me know how you felt after you watched it, whether you would agree with that, and leave a comment as to what you think I should review next, and subscribe to be here for the next review. Thanks for staying, and I'll catch you guys on the next one.